Hey guys, once again, thanks for checking out my channel. This is Ewan Henry with Tech in My Life. Today, I want to talk about how I capture some footage while I'm doing my cycling. If you know, or you may or may not know, I'm an avid cyclist. Not too much of the backstory, but I've been riding for several years. Used to be very, very serious, then not so serious, then took several years off, and then I got back into cycling about maybe 7 years ago. This is going to segue into another video. We're going to talk a little bit about my health in another video. Had some ups and downs, but right now I'm back to being healthy, feeling pretty good. But anyway, the main topic is cycling and my GoPro and how I capture the footage. We're going to get into placement, where I place the camera on the bike, how I put the camera on the bike. I'm going to talk a little bit about the bike also, the bike itself, and trial and error. I'm going to talk a little bit about the settings, how I set up my GoPro to capture some video, and the editing side of it also. Like after I capture the clips, how you put them together, how I edit them, what I use to edit them, and how I, push them out to YouTube. On my personal channel, I have a lot of cycling videos and not so much on Tech in My Life. So as far as the tech that I use a GoPro with the chest strap, the chesty, and it's okay. You get a decent perspective. You get your hands in the shot, your hands holding your handlebars, and you get a wide view. It's fairly decent. I think that particular view is really cool with mountain bikers. You get to see their hands and the handlebar moving and stuff like that. On the road, I think the chest strap is just too cumbersome to go on a long ride. Let's talk first about a couple parts that I use. Because I go on a bike ride, I can be out for an hour. I can be out for 4 or 5 hours on my bike. If it's a short ride, like an hour, I won't start it as soon as I pull out of my driveway. I'll start it when I get a little bit more into it. I have a training buddy that I ride with. So once I catch up with him, I'll usually start the video then, because if it's for an hour ride, maybe an hour and a half ride, I'll start it maybe 15, 20 minutes into the ride. And once I catch up with him, that's when I'll start it. Once he goes his way and I go my way, then I'll stop it. And recording time is about an hour, which is usually perfect because just about that time, the battery's going dead. The internal battery on the GoPro is good for about an hour, so that works out pretty good. Now, if I'm going longer than an hour, what I did was I bought a backup battery, power bank. I have 2 of them. I tested it. The first one was like a 10,000 milliamp hour battery. It's a big chunky battery, and I found it was just way overkill. I went on a 4-hour ride once, and I was using that big chunky 10,000 milliamp hour battery, and I only lost 1 out of 4 bars. So quarter of the power. And the GoPro battery itself was still completely fully charged. And like I said, the backup battery was only down 1/4 of the power. So I figured that's just way overkill at 10,000 milliamps. So I just kind of cut it in half and got one that's 5,000 milliamp hour. I'm sure you can find them on Amazon. It's a 5,000 milliamp hour. You get it in the shot here, good. Okay, so this battery pack, what I did was I attached one of the adhesive GoPro attachment there at the top or the bottom, whichever, and another one on this side. And what that allows me to do is I can take this off, separate this. This is the GoPro attachment right here. So here we have So there it is. It's a pretty thin battery pack. It's also pretty light. You got your USB input, output right there. And GoPro mount at the top, GoPro mount at the bottom. And again, it's pretty thin, pretty light. So you might ask, why did I attach the GoPro mounts on here? Well, we'll take this and we'll slide that in there. So that's that. Then we'll take the GoPro and we'll attach the GoPro on here. So once the GoPro's on here, then we use one of these. Okay, so this is like 8 inches long. And the cool thing about this little USB cable is it has 45-degree angle, 45-degree angle. And we'll take that and hook that there and into, there we go, into the side of the GoPro. Okay. Okay. So while we're at it, I want to talk about, segue real quick into a little attachment, and we'll get into why we do this a little later. But what I have on the GoPro here is a neutral density filter. So this is a PolarPro. It's a neutral density filter. This one is a 16. It came in a kit with 8, 16, and 32, and it goes from lighter 8, like darkness, 16, which is twice the amount of darkness, and 32, which is twice the amount of that darkness. So what it does, it limit the amount of light that's going to get into the sensor. Now you might ask, why do you want to do that? So when I'm setting up my GoPro, I'm setting it up to shoot at manual shutter speed of half of whatever frame rate I'm going to be shooting at. So for example, if I want my recordings to be at 60 frames per second, I'm going to set my shutter speed at 120. So 60 is half of 120. There's reasons for that, and there's guys that can explain it better than me. But what it does, it's getting the correct amount of light onto the sensor for the correct shutter speed. That being said, if it's a super bright day, right, and you want to bring that frames a second, you want to shoot at that 60 frames a second, which means your shutter speed is going to be at 120, and it's super, super bright out, and you want that low ISO to get that nice quality. What you want to do is put the correct neutral density filter on there, also known as ND filter. You put the correct ND filter on there, and you will see that it brings the light down, because if you take it off, the image could be overexposed. So you put it on, it brings that light down, and you get your correct exposure. Once you get it dialed, your quality of video is going to be that much better, and you're just going to have that much more control over your final results. So that being said, we got this going. We got the camera attached to the battery. We got the battery. Now what we're going to do is attach the battery to the bike. Now let's take a look and see how we do that. So now we got the bike. Okay, so we're going to start by looking at this little device right here. So this little gizmo is by a company called FormMount. I bought this when I found them on a Kickstarter when they first had this come out. And what I like about it, it centers my my cycling computer it centers it. And once you're looking down, all you see is a cycling computer. You don't see an arm or anything attached. It's a really cool little device, but what I like the most about it is it's modular. But what it also does, it has a GoPro mount at the bottom of it, but you can also mount your GoPro. Now, I can mount the GoPro directly to this, but what I choose to do is make it a little bit more modular, and I put a GoPro mount on the bottom of it. So what I can do now is just slide the battery and there you go, Bob's your uncle. So that's one way you can do it. Now, it's not really clean here because typically what I would do is have it backwards and the wire would be back here, sort of like this, tucked away, right? So that's one way I do it. Now, another way I do it is when it's this way, if I'm riding and it's a big group ride, I'll do it this way because it's just a clean look, and the other riders, you'll see a bunch of the other guys riding sometimes in the summertime. Pre-COVID-19, we were sometimes on a Saturday ride, 25, 30 guys riding, and it's pretty cool because, you know, it'll just capture all the other riders. Now, if it's just me and my training partner riding, what I'll do is mount it to the stem. So there's another little attachment here on the head tube. So it took me a while to find that top cap. And after I bought it, it came from, I think, a little company out of China. Found it on eBay, bought it, totally forgot I bought it. And it took, my God, it had to have been 3 to 4 weeks before I got it. But it's perfect for me. I actually like this position a little bit more than down here, because when it's mounted up here, my hand, just my hand holding the hoods is in the shot. And I really like that. It gives a little bit more perspective, and nothing for nothing. When it's clean and nothing else in the shot, you know, if it's just me riding by myself, it just looks like someone walking with a GoPro, as opposed to when my hands are in the shot, you know someone's riding a bicycle because you see the hands, you see the handlebars, you see my cycling computer. It just gives it a little bit more perspective, makes it, it's a little more relative to what I'm doing because it's adding in that element of the handlebars, my hands, the cycling computer. And again, it's more perspective and a little bit more relative to what I'm doing. That's just my opinion. Take it with a grain of salt. I know some people just like the really clean look with nothing else out there other than the road and the trees going by or whatever. And if you're gonna do an overlay with your speed, I believe it's the Garmin app that lets you add an overlay where you can add your different metrics like your speed, your power, your heart rate, your cadence. You can add a route so it's overlaid, and as you're riding, it uses the GPS in the cycling computer to kind of give you an idea on a map of where you're going, so on and so forth. So again, that's basically it for how it's mounted to the bike. And again, it's just an overview. Battery pack, 5,000 milliamp hour battery pack, GoPro mount at the top, GoPro mount at the bottom. The GoPro mount at the top attaches to the form mount, cycling computer mount, and at the bottom, the GoPro mount attaches to the GoPro. I can take that off. I can take the GoPro off from the bottom and mount it to my top cap. There's a GoPro mount on the top cap. and I use a 12-inch USB plug into the battery pack, and I've yet to deplete this battery pack completely, but if I did, I would still have 1 hour of charge left on the GoPro itself. So this battery pack, let's say, is good for 3.5, maybe 4 hours, with the addition of the 1 hour from the battery in the GoPro, because this is basically just charging the battery inside the GoPro. You can add an additional hour on top of that. Very few of my rides are going to be in that 4 or 5 hour range, and nothing for nothing, even if I did ride 4 or 5 hours and decided to upload it to YouTube, who's going to want to watch me ride 4 or 5 hours anyway? Dare I say, who's going to want to watch me ride an hour? But that being said, we're going to move on now. You got an idea of how I attach to my bike. We're going to move on and show some settings in the GoPro, how I set up the GoPro, and then we're going to move on to what I use to edit on the computer, and we'll do that right now. Let's move on. Okay, so what we're going to do is use the GoPro app on my phone here. I'm using a Galaxy Note phone. I'm going to launch the GoPro app. Okay, so what we're going to do here, we're going to use the GoPro app to set up my GoPro to my likings, my preference. And you launch the app. I'm assuming you already set up to use the app to control your GoPro. And I'll go into Control GoPro. It'll take a moment here to find the GoPro and log in, and we'll go from there. So once you're all connected, you're going to go into Settings. Now, in Settings, looks like I have it here set up. I was doing some photos, so we're going to do that. We're going to go to Video, and you hear the GoPro acknowledge that it switched from still photos to video. You go into Settings. The first setting, aspect ratio, I set it to wide, 16:9 aspect ratio. It acknowledges resolution. I already have it set to 4K frames per second. I already have it set to 60 frames a second. Field of view, wide. Stabilization is on. Low light is on. Short clip is off. Important, Pro Tunes. We're gonna, you can have Pro Tunes off, and the GoPro is gonna do a lot of the settings automatically for you. I always have Pro Tunes on. Shutter speed. You don't want your shutter speed to auto. Now, I was saying before, if your frames per second is 60, you're going to want your shutter speed at twice that amount, double the frames per second. So frames per second at 60, we're going to have our shutter speed set to 120. Minimum ISO, maximum ISO, or ISO limit. I have my minimum set to 100 here. I have my maximum set to 800. So what that'll do is, as I'm riding, if I come to an area where there's a lot of trees and it's lower light, it's going to automatically shift the ISO. It's not going to change the shutter speed, and it's not going to change my frames per second. That's all going to stay the same. Now, if you didn't have that set up specifically to do that, the GoPro will possibly shift your frames a second. It'll shift your shutter speed, and it just won't be consistent if you have that stuff set to auto, where before, I believe the shutter speed was set to auto. The shutter speed would be changing to compensate for your light. So in this case, we set our shutter speed to 120. We set our ISO, white balance, I set that to auto. Sharpness, I leave it at medium. Now color, this is important. And this is important for another reason we're going to get into once we load videos onto the computer and go into our editing. Now, when we get to color, you have a choice, GoPro colors or flat. What you want to do is set it to flat. The reason for that is in flat, you'll get a wider color gamut. Now, if you set it to flat and you pull it up and you look at the image, it's going to look just that way, flat. But what you'll do is when you get into your image editing software, you can control how much saturation, how much you want to open up your shadow areas. If you have some areas where it's overexposed or the highlight is clipping, or the highlight is sky or your clouds are really washed out, sometimes you can bring the detail back in those washed out areas by just reducing the highlight. Or if the image is overexposed, you can lower the exposure in your video editing software. So after we do color, audio, Pro Tools low, audio. So that's about it for my settings. Everything else I kind of just ignore, leave it as it is. And I hit done. Now, let's put this away for a second. You can go back to that. We can close that out. And that's done. Okay, what I'm gonna do now is pull in a clip. First thing, it's pretty simple. You got media, cut, edit, deliver, color, deliver. Obviously, each one of the icons here, media is the stuff that you recorded. Cut and edit, I don't use cut too much, I use edit, is how you put the clips together. Color, that's where I do some of the color adjusting. I don't do too many audio adjusting, but that's what Fairy Light is about. And deliver is just exporting the clip or rendering out the clip after you're done. So to start, I'll find some clips here. Let's see, what do we have? Media, videos, we'll go to rides, and in rides let's find something recent. Here we go, April 1st 2020. Now these clips here, I'll pull one up for example. Here we got a clip. I'm going to pull this into the media pool. It'll ask me, do I want to change? And I don't want to change. So we'll go real quick and we'll go to edit. Now I'm not going to get too much into how the software works. I'm just going to do some basic adjustments because I want you to kind of get an idea of how the image, the video look before and after I edit it. So we select the image here. Image, I keep saying image, I'm used to photography, but we're doing videos, of course. So in the video clip here, you see my buddy riding in front of me here. And it looks pretty flat. And that's the reason why we record from the GoPro in the flat profile, because we want to be able to control the way the image look. So we're going along here. So I'll just find a section that I want to put into the video film strip here. I'll just hit pause. We'll use some shortcuts in for where you want the video clip to start, and that's by hitting I, and we'll do out where we want the video clip to end by hitting O. So now we have this little clip here, this little section, and we'll just drag it to the timeline, and you see it was just added right here to the timeline. Let's make that a little bigger, and here. So now in the timeline we have this video clip, and there we go. So what we're going to do now is jump from edit over to color, because we want to touch up some of that color. You can see, I was saying before, sometimes your clouds, the difference between the bottom and the top, your bottom portion, which is a little darker, might be exposed properly, but sometimes if it's really bright out, your skies can be overexposed. So what we're going to want to do first is I'll drag down the overall exposure a little bit just to bring back some of that detail in the cloud. Now what happened right there is we lost some light at the bottom portion right here. But since it's in that flat profile and it's a wider color gamut, wider color range, there's more information there. Because it was already bright, it's information in there that we can pull back by just opening up the shadows a little bit. So we'll open up the shadows. Now, again, I don't know how much of this you're going to be able to see and detect in on YouTube, but it just opened up that shadow area just a little bit. You don't need it a lot. And as far as the dark area goes, I'm sorry, as far as the brighter area goes, we can still recover some of that by lowering the highlights there. Boom, look at those clouds. You got some of the grayer parts of the clouds just came back by just lowering that highlight. But again, the image is still kind of flat. As far as the color goes, the way the color would pop and be vibrant, you look at the grass, the grassy area here in the green, you got some yellow grassy area here. It's not really popping off the page yet. So what we'll do right here, we'll just boost some of that saturation up, and boom, look at that. The clouds, the bluer portion of the sky, that blue in the sky just jumped out a little bit more. And we'll boost up the saturation a little more. We're going to add just a little bit of contrast. And look at that. The yellow in the this divider here, the medium going down the middle, that yellow is super bright yellow. You're looking at some of the colors on the cyclist jersey. Those little colors are popping out. The blacks are a deeper black because of the contrast. We darken up the contrast. But again, the sky looks much better. The darker areas, the shadowy areas, that shadow was opened up a little bit to add some light to those shadowy areas. Now, again, this is DaVinci Resolve. It's a free software. It's such a powerful software, and it's free. That's the part that just blows my mind. I'm just going to hit play here for a second, and look at that. That is such a big difference, considering we started off with that flat profile, and with a little bit of adjustment, we were able to open up the shadow areas, add some color to the sky, make that blue really pop, make the colors in the jersey really pop. And even if you're looking at it now, you're like, oh, we're riding through this wooded area and there's trees, and let's say the road was darker, we could just open it up even more right here. We can use this curves to open up that area. So there, that's just some of the basics of DaVinci Resolve. That's how I use it. From there, you go to deliver and choose the settings of your preference. I like MP4s, the codec H.264, the resolution 1920 by 1080 frames a second is 60. You can change all of that in the timeline right here. If you wanted to do if it was filmed in 4K and you wanted to maintain that 60 frames a second, you could have changed that here when you first imported the clip. But that's basically it. I start off, I mount the GoPro, I use a backup battery, I do the settings with the use my phone to just do the settings, and after I do the settings to get the GoPro to record the way I want it to record, I grab those images, I grab those clips, stick them in DaVinci Resolve, do some quick edits there to get that color the way I like it, and hit export. Now, all that being said, it sounds like it's boom, boom, boom. It can be a process, because what happens with GoPro, if you're recording an hour or 2 hour ride, GoPro record in about 10-minute segments, so you end up with a bunch of clips. You got to put all the clips together, do the adjustments for each clip, cut and paste the adjustments from one clip to the other, so it's consistent throughout all of the clips, and then render it out. And you can go that extra mile if you want to do the overlays, because what you're going to do now, you're going to render it out to one whole long video clip. So you're going to have like a 1 hour, 2 hour video clip. You can take that video clip, put it into another software, another application, the Garmin Edge application. There you can use those overlays to overlay your metrics again, your power, your heart rate, your cadence, your speed, and possibly, if you want, a map of your route. So that's pretty much it. That's my workflow. That's how I go from recording the ride, editing the ride, exporting the ride, uploading it onto YouTube, so people can see what, so people can see the ride. And the purpose for it is sometimes, if you're bored, and there's tons of applications that you can use for riding indoors with, and so on. But if you want to pull up a video of someone going for a ride and just kind of do your indoor training while pretending, you're on a beautiful summer day ride or something like that, there's tons of them on YouTube where you can pull that up. So that's about it. Hope you enjoyed it. If I got any questions, if I went over anything that's confusing or too fast or not enough detail, please feel free to leave a question, and I'll try to get back to you guys as soon as I can. Thanks again for watching. Subscribe if you found anything here. If you found anything here interesting, or you appreciate the video, be sure to leave a comment, subscribe if you like it, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching.